Welcome back, Double Uver, and that usually is an exhale sign for this guy as he gets ready for all things scorecard from, let's see, Aberdeen to Delmarva to Bowie to Frederick to Norfolk to Baltimore. But in between, when there's a glimmer of light, a little bit of hope for the Terps, Luke Jones watches basketball. And, I think the Terps have sucked us in here the last week or two, right? In the absence of football, in the absence of any real hope for baseball. They're 5 in and they're 5 down, and they had a 20-point lead at halftime that they sort of exterminated in the second half. But they are worth watching, and I've set my dial for Friday night and Monday night as they now go out into the Midwest, and they are a top 25 basketball team, and at least for half the game looked the part, Luke, on Monday night.
Yeah, and certainly we can get into what happened in the second half on Monday night, but I think just how Maryland has responded since the Seton Hall loss, which they came back from finals, they lose an unimpressive home performance against Seton Hall, and since then they've taken care of their business. They've won 6 in a row. Certainly their stars have played at a high level. Bruno Fernando, Anthony Cowan, Jaylon Smith has been such a welcome addition and has been fun to watch as a local product. But their stars have risen to the occasion, and that's kind of what you need if you're going to be that top 20 kind of team. And I think on paper, everyone said, okay, Maryland's young, but the talent is there. No one's doubted Mark Turgeon's ability to bring in good players or good talent into College Park. The question has been, what has he done with it? How has it meshed? How has it been brought together to extract successful team results? And that's where it's been, it's left you wanting. But as far as Monday night, they looked really, really good for the first half, and into the second half they had a 21-point lead, and then Nate Reavers started making three-pointers, and the Badgers started making three-pointers, and Maryland kind of went through one of those scoring droughts that you have sadly come to expect under Mark Turgeon. But
it was so lopsided, right? It was like their defense fell apart, and they didn't score for 10 minutes. After the first 10 minutes, the defense really produced the offenses. That's how they got out to the lead they got out to. They were making shots off transition. Wisconsin couldn't make a shot. It was a beautiful thing. I said, I even tweeted, these are the good Terps. This is when things are really going well for them. You saw how good they can be, and then in the end, you saw how everything could fall apart. It's a nice little life lesson for these youngsters, as Turgeon pointed out in the aftermath, right?
No question about it. But I'll also say, Wisconsin is a better team than they showed through the first 25 minutes. They weren't making any shots. Ethan Happ, their All-American, which Maryland did a great job holding him to 10 points. But Reavers got on a roll, scored, I believe, all of his 18 points came in the second half. Davison hit a couple shots. So Wisconsin made their run. Certainly you don't want to see it get to that point where it goes from a 21-point lead to you're trailing in the final minute, and you need Anthony Cowan to hit a long three-pointer to put you back ahead. But and Turgeon talked about this after the game with his post-game interview, where in the big picture, it was probably good that happened to them. And of course, you're acknowledging that they still won. But in the big picture, for them to be tested like that after they had a big lead, after Wisconsin started hitting some shots and making their run, and Maryland, as you pointed out, went through their stretch where they just didn't make anything. I think they had a stretch where they scored 3 buckets in the 13-minute, over the last 13 minutes. It was Anthony Cowan doing that scoring, and they went over 11 minutes without a field goal during Wisconsin's comeback. So, it wasn't a perfect performance by any stretch of the imagination, but good to see them get off the that and not just completely go into a shell, no pun intended, after Wisconsin punched them in the mouth and retook the lead. That was shaping up to be one of the all-time worst Mark Turgeon kind of loss.
Oh, I mean, when they fell behind, I didn't have the heart to wake my wife up. I mean, she fell asleep. She's enjoying watching the Terps. We're watching basketball instead of hockey, right? So we're just, this is our different winter thing. We've fallen into Terps mode. I might even take her down to a game next month after the Super Bowl. If it gets exciting, and I don't know what they're going to do to invigorate the fan base or get the kids back on campus, whatever it is, but certainly Cowan stands in the middle of this. And I talked to Robert Kennedy about this, about how Trimble was that guy that has to have the ball at the end. And if you learned anything on Monday night, it's they're not going to be setting up shots for Smith or for Fernando at the end. Maybe Fernando, but really they want Cowan to have the ball, and he wants the ball. And I sense a little Steph Curry sort of iciness in him. You know, he's not flashy, taunty, whatever. He is baby-faced assassin sort of kind of a little bit, and has grown up a little bit into this. This is nice to see him play the part of the upper statesman around here a little bit, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. And, I mean, it's kind of natural when you're in a late-game situation that you want it to be in the hand of your guard. I mean, it's just that's pretty commonplace. Yeah, are there some bigs you feed it into? Sure, but in crunch time when you need a big shot, it's going to be in the hands of your point guard, and he's really risen to the occasion. I mean, you look at how the last couple of weeks, he's been a second-half player. I mean, he's had games where he's done nothing in the first half, and then you look up and he has 17, 18, 19 points. And
he was garbage the other night, right? I mean, not the Wisconsin game, the game before Wisconsin.
What, Indiana?
Indiana. Oh, he was terrible in the first half.
Well, I mean, but it really speaks to some of that moxie that you were just talking about, where he'll have some games where the first half isn't pretty, and then he'll come out there and he'll be the man in the second half. So, but it's really, I mean, Cowans kind of led the way. I mean, he's leading them in scoring, of course, but between him, Bruno, and Jaylon Smith, you know, with what Sticks has been able to give them as a freshman, it's encouraging. And even Eric Ayala hit some big shots for them in the first half on Monday night. So it really, truly needs to be a few guys that can do that for you. I mean, the problem with Maryland a couple of years back was it was Melo, Trimble, and that was it. And even though Cowan has the ball for those critical moments, you have other guys that are still making really important contributions to you. So I've warmed up to this team, and it wasn't so much that I was down on these players. It's just, you know, you kind of go down this road with Mark Turgeon teams over and over and over, where, you know, they have a couple, you know, either a decent win or they play a really good team tough early in the season, and you say, okay, well, that's a nice moral victory, and then they never really get any better. And it feels like this team is getting better, and certainly they have some big games coming up, and they're going to have some opportunities to prove just how good they really are. Whether they're good or really good, they're going to have those opportunities, but it's been good to see them come out of finals, bounce back from that Seton Hall loss, and get themselves on a roll here early on in Big Ten play.
Well, and you mentioned the falling in like with them or romanced up with them or watching them on TV on these cold nights and trying to say, well, what night in February, you know, when did they play again at home? Let's see, hey, Northwestern in a couple weeks, and we get Purdue on the 12th. All right, maybe go down there on a 12-degree night and ice skate down there or whatever. Lindo, has sort of won me over the last couple of days. A couple of games as being a little bit of a Mouton figure in this, right? Like sort of a little bit of an energy bolt and a guy that is strictly in there to clean the glass and play defense.
No question. And I think you look at what they were able to do against Happ. I mean, Happ's an All-American player. I mean, and what they were able to do with really kind of their three-headed monster. I mean, Bruno, Jaylon Smith, and Lindo, who didn't score at all on Monday night, but
didn't try to
rebounded, and I think he got some serious post-game credit for the job that he was able to do in the post and help defend. I mean, you need that. You don't need 6 guys to score in double figures every night. You need complementary pieces. You need to have your scorers, but you have to have guys who can defend and are going to use their fouls. You look at Lindo, 23 minutes, 9 rebounds, 1 block. 3 personal fouls used. I mean, that's kind of what they need him to be right now. I mean,
and also getting the other team's guys in foul trouble and getting them off the floor, that's a big wow. And if you have the ability to do that in these kind of games, get the other team's best player off the floor when that's how you go up 20 points, quite frankly.
Right. I mean, you need guys who can do that. I mean, you need a bench that can go 9 deep. And, Maryland's maybe not quite 9 deep, but, it feels like they're getting into that 8 deep rotation that they feel good about. And then, you hope some other guys can lend a few minutes here and there when you're in a time of need, when you have your own foul trouble you're dealing with. But it feels like it's starting to come together for this team. They're 15-3 now. They're 6-1 in the Big Ten. You have the 2 heavyweights at the top of this conference where, they're going to get their chance to play Michigan State here very soon. They're going to get their chance to play Michigan twice. So they're going to have every opportunity to prove just how good they really are. I think they're pretty darn good at this point, but they have a chance to prove that they're really, really good over this next 5-6 week period. So,
if you want to climb the rankings, this is where you can't stub your toe, right? You can't go out to Ohio State and lose to a team that hadn't won, and then going to Michigan State. I don't know what needs to be said about that, or where they need to win to prove that they're that team. And if they lose by some consolation prize and lose by 6 points or something like that, you don't feel awful about them, but you understand where they are, and they wouldn't get a chance to see Michigan State again until the Big Ten tournament. But it feels to me like all of these teams, whether it's the teams that aren't ranked right now, but you felt okay about Wisconsin, Ohio State. Certainly, you felt good about Purdue going into the year. A lot of these teams, Nebraska, as well. These are not slouch teams. It's a pretty good conference through and through. But to your point, Michigan State are different, but you better not lose to Ohio State if you want to be an elite team in the division.
Oh, yeah. You have to take care of business. And look, none of these games, especially on the road, and we talked about this for years in the ACC, and I think this is one of the years in the Big Ten where it really applies as well. The conference is so competitive, and I think there is enough talent top to bottom where those road games, you're right, you can't take that lightly. You can't be looking ahead against Michigan State and stub your toe against Ohio State. And
you mentioned Seton Hall and learn a lesson there, right? That was their life lesson, right?
Yeah. You have to take care of business. Ohio State, they're 10th in the Big Ten. They're 12-4. They're not dreadful in the scope of just in general. They're not a contender to be at the top of the Big Ten at this point, but they're still a team that is certainly capable of beating you if you don't show up. This is nothing changes. Maryland, they're on a nice run now. I like the makeup of this team, but there are a lot of. You look at the schedule and you kind of feel like, okay, it's mid-January. You're about 6 weeks out from March. There's a lot of basketball to be played between now and then. So, you just go down the list and. They've beaten some good teams. They've beaten some teams that could have given them trouble in the past. I like the fact that they took care of their business at Minnesota and won pretty handily a week ago. And, they took care of Indiana, who had been ranked, and Wisconsin wasn't ranked that long ago. It was, it's been a nice run for them. But, you see some of the games still remaining on the schedule, and you don't want to get too comfortable. You don't want to be looking at the bracketology and the NCAA tournament projections just yet. Just keep winning games. Take care of your business at home and win the road games that you're supposed to win, and then you roll the dice when you go to Michigan State or you go to Michigan and you see what happens. And I'll say this much, I expect them to compete with those teams. I'm not going to say I expect them to win, but I think this team they've shown me something over the last 2.5 weeks or so, and I'm much more encouraged about this Terps team than I was before Christmas.
Well, that's part of the problem, right? Now it's, Turgeon has some talent here, and how's he going to manage the bench? And it doesn't feel as much like a couple years ago when everybody had the I'm a star. This thing feels like a bunch of young kids playing ball together that have a nice feel for each other, at least at this point, which is how they're winning these games. And certainly when the game got heavy on them, and, as Ray Lewis could say, you could hear a rat piss on cotton, when they fell behind and they're draining threes and they're losing all of a sudden in a game when my wife fell asleep 15 minutes earlier and they were up by 20 points. That was a real gut check for them, and I think for Turgeon as well. The people that are out to hang him based on their March record and based on where they are, I think the expectations have really ramped up here. Even when you say you're coming back to the program now and you're watching now and you're encouraged and you're buying in, part of buying in is there's going to be some disappointment around the corner, and there's going to be a night when this thing goes to hell in a handbasket and they lose and they don't play well, you think. But where is Turgeon in all of this? Because it's really about him more than it is the players, because the players are coming and going. Now, they've turned over 3 or 4 times. The jury's more out on him when it comes to the guys in the M red sweaters down at College Park, I think.
Sure, there's no question about that, and he should be under a lot of scrutiny because he's compensated handsomely. I mean, the expectations at this program rose a lot during the Gary Williams era. And look, I mean, I understand the end of Gary's tenure wasn't the most stellar, but expectations should be high here. There's nothing about their situation from a basketball standpoint that doesn't suggest that. I mean, they should be a top 15, top 20 kind of program year in and year out. And if things go really well and you find a couple really special guys from a recruiting standpoint, you should have a chance to be a Final Four team or a chance to contend for a national championship at some point. I'm not saying that every single year, but the standard should be that you're an NCAA tournament team, and that hasn't been as consistent as it needs to be. And I think Mark Turgeon would realize that. Now, at times, does he kind of bristle at some of the criticism? Yeah, and even I saw he even got in a dig with his post-game comments on Monday about how they, everyone says they can't finish off close games. Well, they haven't been able to finish off a lot of close games the last few years, and that goes back to what he's doing and how this team is organized at the end of the game and what they try to do out of underneath the basket or out of a timeout, whatever it might be. Those are things he's going to be scrutinized for, and that's fair. He's been here long enough now. I mean, this isn't a guy in his second or third year. He's gotten a long leash, and
it's his program. There's no doubt about that, right?
Yeah. So I mean, and look, I'm not saying that he's on the hot seat from the standpoint of just from a financial and contractual standpoint, and knowing what this school has had to do on the football side. I don't think we're at that point where we're talking about Mark Turgeon really, truly being on the hot seat just yet. But that seat should be warm, just in terms of the results needing to be better. So in that context, it's been good to see Maryland get off to the start that they have here in the Big Ten. But all of that being said, this is an incredibly young team. I mean, your leaders, Anthony Cowan and Bruno Fernando, Cowan's a junior, Fernando's a sophomore. So you are talking about a bunch of young players here. And when you have young players, it's exciting because you think about the possibility of them getting better and them not yet reaching their ceiling. And I think that applies here. But when they're younger, you also know there's more volatility. And you could have a night where you go, it's a sleepy Tuesday night somewhere out in the Midwest, Big Ten country, a school that's just kind of okay. And you can envision a scenario where Maryland sleepwalks.
It was envisions. I was watching a game in Minnesota last week out at the barn, right? And I remember them going out there and losing to a team that was 0 and like 100. You know what I mean? On a night when they shouldn't have, when they were a ranked team. I mean, it was, they've done that, and the Big Ten sort of lends itself to that with these long flights and these sleepy games. And, they have to go to Wisconsin February 1st. They have to go to Nebraska on February the 6th. They have to go to Michigan. It will not be sleepy. They have to go to Iowa, who's currently ranked. That will not be sleepy. They go to Penn State. Yeah, that will be sleepy at the Bryce Jordan Center on the 27th of February. So, those are the tricky places. But first up, the first tricky place is Ohio State here. This is where the expectations are big, and I think that's where the microscope's down on them, because you can say, well, we lose to Michigan State, we lose to Michigan. All right, you're not that team, but there's no excuse to lose to Penn State. Sure,
and that's where, if you're Mark Turgeon, when you have a young team that is starting to have some success, and you even heard it. I mean, Timmy B and the FS1 post game guys were talking about Maryland being a team that maybe you need to start talking about not at the same exact level as Michigan and Michigan State, but when you're 6-1 in the conference, hey, you're not far behind those two teams. So, and you could kind of tell Turgeon being presented that discussion, he kind of bristled at that, and I think a lot of that, one, is just his personality, and two, you don't want your young guys reading their press clippings too quickly. Certainly they're off to a good start in the conference, but there's a long way to go, and there's still plenty that these guys need to get better with. So it's exciting. It's certainly, I think, starting to force people to pay a little more close attention after last year was as underwhelming as it was, and they had all the hired guns a few years back, and yeah, they did get to a Sweet 16, but that team still left you kind of wanting more. I don't think there's any dispute about that. But this team, it's likable. There's some local kids on it. That always helps, and you really get the sense that they're coming together and playing some good ball. Now, what the lesson learned from Monday night is you got to do that for 40 minutes, and they've been doing that for the most part. They certainly didn't do it on Monday night, and Wisconsin very, very nearly made them pay for it.
He is Luke Jones. He is Luke at WNST.net, and we're up on the Terps and trying to get through the Ravens and the Orioles and Hall of Fame voting next week as well. We're going to be debating the Mike Messina, Kurt Schilling, Edgar Martinez debates as well. You can find it all out in the BuyAToyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. Of course, we are out on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat. Tweeting about the Terps and writing about the Terps in the middle of these games. So if you find yourself watching the Terps playing out in Columbus this week or in East Lansing on Monday, make sure you're checking us out. Also, the championship games this weekend as well out on social media. All of our WNST coverage. I got so many sponsors here. I'm just going to give one giant shout out to almost everybody. First off, our newest sponsor is Curio. My man Brian Sanderoff, who joined us. You can hear that out in the BuyAToyota.com audio vault with cannabis education, CBD, but more than that, complete holistic wellness. They have a spa and a wellness facility on York Road just south of Timonium. Check it out. It's right on York Road. When you see the Curio Wellness, stop in, get to know them, and learn about what they do there at CurioWellness.com. Also, Strategic Factory. I'm always drinking out of the orange cup here. It's almost baseball season. Creating your masterpiece, whether you're branding hats, shirts, printed apparel, whatever you're doing to make your business grow, they put the strategy together and can deliver that for you. It's Strategic Factory, great friends of ours, as well as the LifeBridge Health Sports Medicine Institute. I caught up with Dr. Kevin Crutchfield earlier this week talking about head-related injuries and trauma. I've got this brace for my left arm I'm sleeping with. I got to wear it on the video. I haven't done that this week. Dr. Craig Bennett taking care of my elbow. I'm already feeling better. They are the new game plan for sports-related injuries everywhere. They're in Foundry Row in Owings Mills, LifeBridge Health Sports Medicine Institute. You've seen Cal Ripken on the billboards. You're going to hear me talking a lot about them, as well as the Modell Lyric. John Mellencamp coming up. Bill Maher, the great Bill Maher, coming to Baltimore to the Modell Lyric on June 9th. I'm excited about that. Comedy with Jim Gaffigan as well as George Lopez. We got Kansas on March 1st. Britt Floyd is playing. Tons of stuff coming up at the Modell Lyric, but nothing finer than the Manhattans singing Shining Star on February 15th to my wife. So I'm going to be down there for that. I'm going to be there for Mellencamp. Get on out to Modell-Lyric.com. There is always magic at the Modell Lyric. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.